4 children.
Yes, sir.
And a
beautiful wife.
A very dear wife.
Yes.
I was going to comment about that.
Couldn't have the kids without her.
Let's not go there.
For sure.
Well, good afternoon. We're here filming another episode, if you will, of Enter the Mission. And rather than George asking questions, my name is Jim Etheridge. I'm the Executive Director of Brother Brian Mission. And I thought it'd be good if I asked George the questions. So that's our intent today, and we hope you'll enjoy it. But George, it's good to have you, and glad to have you on our staff. And just thought I'd ask a couple of questions about your background. Where are you from, and what was it like? I know you're from Birmingham, but tell us what it was like growing up in Birmingham.
Yeah, so I started off growing up in Midfield. You know, that's where I was kind of raised, in Green Acres area. And then when I was in 4th grade, we moved to Homewood. And so I spent most of my childhood into my adolescence in Homewood. And so typical, Christian home, go to church every Sunday and Wednesday, Dawson Memorial Baptist Church.
Wow.
Until I was in my teenage years, and I started attending Briarwood when I was in high school and got really involved with a ministry called Stampede.
Yeah, I know it. George, one of the first things we try to do here as a chaplain, I know that's your goal, is to lead someone to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. When did you come to know Christ as your Savior? What were some of the circumstances surrounding that decision?
So growing up, obviously in church, going to Sunday school, you would always hear this term Christian thrown around. I'm a Christian, this guy's a Christian. And you would learn about Jesus and Paul and the apostles and whatnot. And I was really curious around 7 years old. I remember I asked my mom, I said, what does it mean to be a Christian? And how do you know when you're ready to be one? And she said, you'll just feel different. She didn't have the greatest, and she might watch this, so sorry, Mom. She's probably a lot better at it now, But anyway, then she's like, you just kind of know. And that really just kind of ate at me. What does that mean? You just know. And so when I was 9, I was in Sunday school and just really kind of started to, the information started resonating with me. They started talking about sin. And I realized that, yeah, I do lie. And yeah, I do things that are not the best. And I realized that that's not going to put you in right relationship with God, and that there's consequences of that. And I don't know if it was fear as much as I really just wanted to know that me and God were right with each other. And so the Sunday school teacher told my mom that she felt like I was ready to hear the gospel, and it was okay if she could come to our house and share it. And so I remember like it was yesterday. The lady's name was Jane or Jan. It was, I remember that. And she came, I can see it like it was yesterday. She sat across from the table with me in my house, and she basically went over the 4 spiritual laws, and so I kind of paid attention. I remember the missing the mark. She talked about, she drew the arrow, and I use it this day in my classes. And she was talking about this is what sin is, and that we miss the mark, and no matter what, it's a miss, and that we have to hit perfection. The only way that can be done is through trusting Jesus and his life and what he's done, and that we align with him and put our faith and trust in what he's done for us to pay for our wrongdoings, and that we get his goodness and he takes our badness away, and we become good with God with that if we trust him. And I was just like, oh, man, I want to do that, what I mean? And so I made a profession of faith, and I remember, she told me, well, in this moment that you've done this, that you now are a child of God, that you've been born again. She went through the whole thing, and I just remember thinking like, wow, I was just really excited about that. I just remember being really excited about it, and I couldn't wait to go get baptized. Of course, in the Baptist church, you got to go through some classes to make sure you know what you're talking about. I remember going that just like, okay, when's this over, man? Let's get this done, let's make this official. So that's when it started. And then obviously I lived a life, teenage years, became really, insecure in certain areas. And I went immediately to biblical teachings and Christian books and things of that nature to really understand. I knew that the answers were in the Bible. And so any problems I went to, the Lord would always draw me to his word. And even in a backsliding time into my, early 20s and into my 30s, it would always be this draw. The Lord would never let me get far enough away. He would always draw me back, and everything would be like, this is missing the mark over and over again. And so that would be really my faith journey.
George, I know I'm going to skip a lot of your life to get to the point.
Sure.
But at some point, you became aware of Brother Brian Mission.
Yes, sir.
Were you aware of it growing up, or was that something that you became aware of as an adult? Tell me, when did you first learn about Brother Brian Mission?
Absolutely. So I moved back here in 2014 from Virginia. We lived there 20 years. And I have a jiu-jitsu school, and I wanted my guys to get involved in some sort of charity work.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of aligning ourselves with Church of the Highlands and doing a lot of their stuff. And one of my guys knew David Carrier, who was the kitchen manager here and died, right? He knew him, and he was like, hey, I can get us to serve dinner at Brother Brian Mission. And I thought it was just like a homeless shelter, what I thought was a soup kitchen in my mind. Right. I had no idea. Right. And so we came and started serving dinner here on Sunday nights, like one Sunday a month, me and my guys. And I met Scott Jones and talked to him about the program, met some of the guys who I thought all worked here. Because in my mind, I was like, well, where's the guys that were supposed to be serving? It looked like a bunch of, it just changed how I saw things, But the cool thing was that when I first came in, the Lord just kind of laid on my heart, this is where I want you to donate some time, to really get involved here. And so I remember asking Scott Jones, I said, hey, how does somebody kind of get involved here? And he said, you got to come and talk to Brian Keene during the week. And I remember it didn't immediately happen. I followed up with him a month later, and he's like, tell him you'll come and meet him on Wednesday or something like that at 11 a.m. So I came in and met with Brian Keene, and we talked. I gave my testimony, just talked about how the call of God in my life. And he let me go and kind of sit in on an orientation class. And that's how I got involved as a volunteer. Started just volunteers teaching that class.
You began to progress in your volunteering. I don't recall the first time I became aware that you were here or around. But as I've gotten to know you, you've impressed me with the manner in which you carry yourself and how you're living out your Christian life. And the knowledge that you communicate. Tell me, do you read a lot? I'm going to ask that you don't have a degree.
Sure.
So I'm not saying it came through a formal theological education, but I'm always impressed with your knowledge. Tell us, what has been that journey for you?
Absolutely. So when I was in high school, I thought maybe I wanted to be a pastor or a Christian psychologist or something. I knew that was kind of what I wanted to do. So I knew you had to go to school to do that sort of thing. And I read all kind of books, any of the Christian authors, R.C. Sproul, any of the guys that are like really popular. I read those guys. But I had this tendency to go, okay, they're all getting their information from the Bible. Mm-hmm. And here I am having these guys tell me about the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so I started, about 10 years ago, I got into this thing where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to read the Bible for a while. And that's all we'll do is just read the Bible. And it's like, where do you start? And so obviously you start at, I think, John 1, chapter 1 of John. And so I started there and I read, the entire thing, all 21 chapters, and it was great. And I was like, what if I just read chapter 1 for every day for a week? Mm-hmm. And then the next week I'll do chapter 2. And then 21 weeks later, I've read it, at least 7 times each chapter, right? Yes. And I started to see my understanding started to grow. And I was like, ooh, what if I do this with this book? And that was really how, and for 10, almost 12 years now, that's what I do every morning is I'll spend, if there's 6 chapters, I'll spend 6 weeks on that book. And, and that really it's that. And, yes. And just, that's the best I can give you.
No, I think it's excellent because like I say, I've seen the product of your study and very impressed with that. We had the opportunity to ask George to be on our staff. And at first he was able to give us 3 days a week. And then we were able to ask him, would he be willing to give us more? And so now you're 4 days a week with us, and you still manage your jiu-jitsu studio.
That's right.
And so I know that's a heavy load that you're juggling. You also have 4 children.
Yes, sir.
And a
beautiful wife.
A very dear wife.
Yes.
I was going to comment about that.
Couldn't have a kiss without her.
Let's not go there.
For sure.
But be that as it may, tell me how you juggle all those responsibilities with your family, which I know would be the top priority in your life past Christ.
Absolutely. I think my wife is just really supportive. She knows that it's kind of what makes me tick is that I have to be involved in a lot of things. I'm always on the move. There's this saying, a rolling stone gathers no moss. That would be my life. And so what I generally do is I try to compartmentalize it. It's like I'm going to do this for this time and try to build my schedule around it. Like I'm going to come home and be with my family this time. And this day's for them. And that's kind of how I try to do it. And if things get in the way of it, does cause me stress that obviously the Lord walks with me in because, I'm trying to be in control of things that a lot of times you're not in control of. which is good. But they're real supportive and appreciative, and I really just try to be with them if I can be with them. I hope as they listen to this, they might be going, oh. But that's really how I do it. I'm just kind of trying to be really involved in the moment, be intentional, whatever moment I'm in, and that's what I try to do.
Well, let me say thank you to your family for allowing you to be a part of our
awesome.
ministry. And I want to ask you some questions about the ministry.
Yes, sir.
As a chaplain, one of the things that we want you to do is get into these men's lives.
Mm-hmm.
These men come to us broken. We feel like that men are not homeless because they run out of money, because they run out of relationships. So we're constantly trying to evaluate those relationships, help restore, reconcile, first with Christ,
yes,
and then with their families. What's been, what I say, the biggest challenge as a chaplain that you see? First of all, as a chaplain speaking into these men's lives, and then secondly, just as a chaplain as a whole, that you conduct yourself around as the authoritative figure. How has that been a challenge for you?
I think probably the same challenge that we have here in the mission, I think we just generally have as men that claim the name of Christ. And that's that we sometimes try to put him in a box and say, okay, he's really good here, but I don't want him to touch anything else, or the rest I got. And the men can be like that too, because they could have grown up in church, made professions of faith when they were 9 years old, and they kind of rely on that. And then the rest is like, I'm going to try to work this out on my own. And saying that, no, he's Lord of all. And it's like, you got to take him out of that box. He doesn't get put in a box.
Yeah.
And so getting them to understand and see that you can't, he's not a lucky rabbit's foot. And he's not something that's going to rubber stamp your life, and that I'm good with God, so therefore what I do is okay. And seeing them, getting them to see that is really difficult. But once they do and they grab it, we can tell immediately. It's like, he's got a hold of them at this point.
What are the characteristics that you would be able to express as far as you can tell? I know what you're describing,
for sure,
but putting it into words for our audience to be able to understand what that would look like.
I think they genuinely love talking about the Lord. I think they genuinely love.
You see that change. That's
Absolutely.
What you see. You go from not really
being in love.
Yeah.
I mean, they get in love. It's crazy. It's just like any other love. I would say that those are just manifestations of that one, and to see this genuine, I love to be involved with all things Christ and all things the Bible. And not everybody has to be a biblical scholar, but they have to love the Lord, and just really they light up. It's hard to put words to, but you know it when you see it, and you can see a change in them, that it really infects everything. They become a new person, and it's pretty awesome to watch.
Biblically, we hear the fruit of the Spirit, and those would be the qualities that you're describing: love and joy and peace and patience. And we see that in the lives of these men as they come to us broken and their lives begin to be put back together. There is that peace, that maturity, if you will.
I would almost say like a confidence. It's a weird in the Lord confidence.
Totally. Yeah.
It's not a cockiness about life and their abilities. It's just this, man, I just know, man, the Lord's got me. It's crazy.
Have you been able to see what you've described in the lives of men that are here? And I'm saying that because there's always people that want to see, what are the results? What do you see as a result? Are we just providing a place to be for someone who likes to drink or does drugs, and broken family, broken hearts, leaving a trail of that? Do we see people who are going forward with a completed life and growing in the Lord and putting their families back together and being a productive citizen? And do you see that? And some examples that come to mind? Are there some?
Yes, sir, I do. And it's pretty amazing when you do see it, because it's not solicited. You don't have to, they literally come to you with it, and they give you examples of it, and they're just fascinated by it. And they're like, and it's almost like they knew it ahead of time, this was a possibility, but now it's like real. It's like, I knew it, but now I know it. And that's kind of what you see. So yes, we see it happen. We see them reaching out, humbling themselves, owning all the muck and the mire that they created. I mean, that's one thing, is the excuses kind of go out the window. It's like, no, I deserve what I got, and I'm just so thankful that the Lord's given me an opportunity to get out of this muck and the mire by you guys, us, and just the circumstances they're in. So we do get to see that. And I would say, you kind of made my eyes be open to this, Jim, is it's about 25%, which is the soils. It's like, wow, you know what? It's kind of that way. If somebody needs statistics,
that's our goal, is 25%.
Sure.
I mean, we'd be great to think of 25%.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I get to see that. And it really, like I said, is centered in them wanting to spend time with the Lord that's unsolicited, because we make them spend some time. They got to get in the Word and they have to go to chapel. But you can see them want to do it on their own. Not because they're trying to get ahead, because there's no getting ahead. Matter of fact, they would just want to do the bare minimum most of the time, right? Like any of us do. But they really genuinely want to know, and they really genuinely want to learn how to apply it in their life, to really walk it out. And you're like, he gets it.
Has there been anyone that you came that you thought there's just no way? He's sort of just here, he needs to be here, but I mean, and the Lord has changed his life in such a direction that you've sat back and went, wow.
I can't say that I've looked at a guy, and it's not because I'm great and just automatically see Christ in people, but it's more that the men have a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's a lot, and I would say just Jason Ash, who we interviewed one time. Jason was really struggling. He was given to me. He was already in Access, already went to the program, and he just was kind of struggling. And it's like there was just a moment where the Lord opened his eyes to the possibility of him working in his life in ministry, and that was a possibility. And it was like a switch got changed in the guy. And it was just like, wow, this man went from here to there.
Yeah.
And to see that like almost happen in an instant right before your eyes is just like that something happened. That happens. That type of thing happens quite often.
We actually do see changed lives, don't we?
We do.
It's not something that we put on a PR piece to try to impress somebody. We actually can look at a number of men who've come through our program, and they're still going forward. We have 5 goals that we want to send each client out with: free of addiction, stable housing and employment, and healthy relationships with God, their family, and others. And so it's encouraging. There are still people out there that have graduated our program that you would know of, and they're still walking with the Lord and doing those things. If you were to summarize going forward, Brother Brian Mission, what would you say to someone who might be tuning in and learning about the mission totally new? What would you describe Brother Brian Mission as?
I would probably describe it as the gospel in action. I mean, we see and hear about the gospel, the good news of Jesus and what he's done in both his life, death, and his resurrection, but we get to see that manifested right before our eyes. And so for the men who may be struggling and don't know if this is the right program for them, I would say, come and see us. Come and see. Mm-hmm. What men said about Jesus, come and see. Just come and see. Let the proof be in the pudding. And it is there. We see the Spirit move in our ministry. We see it. There's not many ministries that can all claim that. They try whatever, maybe whatever reason. I'm not going to get into that. Sure. I don't know. But I just do know that you see it happening here. That would be that. The churches and maybe those that want to get involved with our ministry understand this ministry bears fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's the ultimate goal, is that they will bear much fruit. That's the purpose of being grafted into Jesus, is that we bear much fruit. And we see fruit being manifested. We see it in guys seeking the kingdom and the kingdom being manifested in their life, the internal kingdom of Christ in their life.
And we're seeing lasting fruit. It's not just a
flash in the
spot
pan.
in the pan.
Yeah.
Qualities in a man's life that precursors to their change. Have you began to look for the qualities in a man's life that would welcome that change? Mm-hmm. Or is there something you could put into words there?
Yes, brokenness, that they really see their state. They don't try to make excuses for it. They don't try to say, well, this victim kind of mentality. If circumstances were different in my life, I wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. They fully see and own the fact that, yes, they are their chief problem, and that their solution can only be found in a right relationship with Jesus, and not the cliche of I only need Jesus, which is true, but we can get wrapped up in that. They truly see it. And when they get their eyes open, they're like, oh, wow, that is the solution. You're like, I think we're onto something here.
I think I would put into words my words of humility rather than brokenness. I know that's the same thing. We're constantly striving for the commitment to Christ. But then I think one of the things that we're striving for is surrender. The word surrender has been the word lately for me that I'm trying to urge these men to make, surrendering to the will of Christ, surrendering to obedience to the word of God, surrendering to the authorities over them here, which you're one of those authorities. So is there anything final that you'd like to say to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Jim's point here, just reminded me, I heard one time how we misuse the word give up. Mm-hmm. If we look at give up, it's generally like this negative, oh, you gave up. Yeah. But in reality, it's giving up. It's like I give up. I'm done. I'm hands up in the air. I got nothing.
Sure.
And so it speaks to that. It's teaching these men to just give up. Just give up on all this.
And blessed are the poor in spirit when you come to that point. That's step one in the biblical steps. Step one in the 12-step program is I admit that I'm powerless against the destructive behavior that's waging war in my soul. And so that's that poor in spirit that I think that we are mentioned. Well, it's been a great joy to have George. He, number one, on our staff. Number two, to get to know him as a friend. And number three, to have him on our podcast. And he's the one that's normally sitting in this seat. So I thought it'd be good if we learned a little about him so that you'd know who the guy is who's asking the question. So thank you for joining us, and tune us in next week for another edition of Enter the Mission. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.